Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, it is time to do a show that would have sounded completely ridiculous in almost any of the last 5, 6 years of Ohio State football, but this year might actually be somewhat legitimate. I'm going to talk about some concerns with the Ohio State wide receiver room.
Yeah, we have this is our final show about positional concerns. You can find all of the other positions in the Buckeye Weekly feed. Just go through and you'll see that it's a terrifying time to be talking and discussing Ohio State football. I'm not saying the sky is falling, but watch your heads. So, Tom, the concern with the wide receivers, and that's the key point. It's concern with the wide receivers. There's no concern with one wide receiver, Jeremiah Smith, but my number one concern here is there a number two? And that's I think that's going to be the key thing this season, and it's going to be one of the questions that I ask Ryan Day in terms of when we see him at Big Ten Media Days in oh, a week from who knows when I'm dropping the show, but perhaps right now. But no, this coming week, and it's a real concern. And Tom, if they say if you have two quarterbacks, you don't have any. If you have a one number one and like three number threes, do you have a number two?
Yeah, this is to steal a line from a movie from about 25 years ago. Who does number two work for? And the answer is, well, the number two from last year is the Tennessee Titans. And the number twos who were sort of projected to be the number twos for 2026 Ohio State, they both work for Notre Dame now in Quincy Porter and Mylan Graham. So then, well, you had a really good recruiting pipeline going under Brian Hartline, and then between the NFL draft and the transfer portal, some of those guys are no longer in that pipeline, and now you've got Jeremiah Smith, and you got a bunch of questions. And that doesn't mean there are no answers on this team. It means that there's still sort of some unanswered questions. And I think there are lots of potential answers on this team. And they did a good job in supplementing through the portal, bringing in Kyle Parker, bringing in Devin McCuin. You got Brandon Inniss back. You've got three wide receivers. They brought in four. Three of them are guys who at least are in that conversation for starting this year, or at least playing time this year. Chris Henry sort of at the forefront of that line. But there is not a sure shot guy who can sort of be the 1A to Jeremiah Smith's 1 this year. It just doesn't exist right now. It could. We may walk out of Darrell K. Royal Texas Stadium on the second week of the season after that game and go, well, they found their wide receiver number two, and then we'll at that. Don't worry, you got to wait till at that point we'll say that name, and then you're like, aha, they had nothing to worry about. Entirely possible that that's the case because there's plenty of talent in that room. You just haven't seen it done on the field by any of those guys yet at Ohio State, and so that leaves it as sort of an unanswered question right now.
And even if Mylan Graham and Quincy Porter had returned, we'd still have this question. There would still be who is the number two. Now, Mylan Graham, certainly they wanted him back, and it would have been nice to have him back. He is not nearly as proven as Devin McCuin, and we still have questions about Devin McCuin coming over from UTSA, even as a senior. He's got, about 140 catches to his credit or so, and Mylan Graham has, I don't know, 10, something like that. So the level of production is not even close. But Quincy Porter was injured in the spring, right? So he was like still banged up from last year. So there'd still be these questions even if they hadn't lost those guys. But losing those guys, and they they brought in answers. We just don't know how right the answers are with Kyle Parker and Devin McCuin. So we will see. Those two guys, I think, fit in well with the next concern here, and that's the move to a quicker passing game, which they've talked about doing. We saw some of that in the spring, and they're both used to that in terms of screens and running after the catch. And we've seen Devin McCuin do that throughout his career. Saw him do it a little bit in the spring. We know that that's a thing that Parker does as well. How well does Jeremiah Smith do it? We know the first throw his way as a college player was a quick screen that was going to go 60 yards or so, and he dropped it. And ever since then, he has failed to live up to the hype. But hey, Paris Campbell dropped the first pass thrown his way as well. So Jeremiah Smith is not the first. But how do they adapt to a short passing game? How do and that's blocking, that's rushing, that's catching it and then being essentially a running back after the catch. Now the good thing for Kyle Parker is he looks like a running back when he's got the ball, but everybody else, like, how well do they handle this?
Yeah, and you're being asked to do something that they really just didn't do that much last year. That yards after catch piece of things was something that they talked about a bunch this spring. Can you catch the ball? You pick up the yards you've got with the ball in the air, but then can you turn that into whatever that is plus a whole bunch more? Can you take a 6-yard pass and turn it into a 26-yard gain? Can you take a 10-yard pass and turn it into a 35-yard gain? Like that is sort of the challenge that's out there right now, and you've got guys on the team that certainly can do that. You've got guys on the team that have speed. You've got guys that have that short area quickness to maybe make a guy miss a tackle and turn something short into something long. But with someone like, for example, Brandon Inniss, there were a lot of 7-yard catches that turned into 7-yard gains last year. You gotta have more, and that's something that Brandon Inniss talked about this spring. That's something that Ryan Day talked about this spring. Like this is something that is sort of a known issue for this team, and they got to find solutions. And there are plenty of guys on this team. We have seen Brandon Inniss have a catch and run and turn it into a big play. We have seen we have seen Jeremiah Smith do that a bunch. I think you've seen Devin McCuin do that, albeit not at Ohio State. Kyle Parker certainly has the ability to do that. Chris Henry, I think, has the ability to do that. You got lots of potential solutions there, but that's something that in the spring they were openly talking about. Yeah, this is something we have to do better than we did last year.
It's interesting because Julian Sayin completed 77% of his passes last year. The quick passing is going to increase that, but I also think he's going to be more aggressive downfield, which will decrease some of his percentages, and also won't be throwing to Carnell Tate, which will also decrease some of those percentages. So he may end up right back at 77 and doing it in a completely different way this year. So that will be interesting to see how they go. But there's just a lot of moving parts in there, and so those moving parts all have to operate, as opposed to dropping back and throwing downfield, where yes, you have to block and you've got to get not even, you don't even have to get open necessarily. You've just got to be able to bring the ball down. And I think maybe this is a way to keep them from having to deal with so many 50-50 balls that they're not as prepared this year to catch. And then my third concern is, will they need to rely on a true freshman this year, and what that looks like if they do. Now, in the past, you can go back to 1996, David Boston, where he played early, but they weren't relying on him until like the second half of the season when he became a starter. Kind of the same with Garrett Wilson. He never started, and he was always in the rotation, but he became more and more prevalent. And then Chris Olave as a true freshman in 2018, kind of that same deal, but not as big as Garrett Wilson. And so if a freshman does have to be relied upon, is he how reliable, how reliable and how relied upon? Is he the number 2? Is he the number 3? Is he the number 4? And what that production looks like? What does a bad route and an interception, those sorts of things that you just can't predict? How often does that happen because you're relying on a freshman, if you have to?
Yeah, and I think that some of the potential answers absolutely are part of that freshman class. I would put Chris Henry Jr. probably at the top of that list, but it could be Jerquaden Guilford, could be Brock Boyd. I don't think those are guys who they are looking at as day one starters. Maybe Chris Henry turns into that. Maybe that may also depend a lot on the guys around him, because I think you'd ideally not want to be in a position where you have to throw a guy out there, because Jeremiah Smith has sort of broken everyone's expectations for what a true freshman receiver looks like, where you go, what's a good true freshman wide receiver season? And everyone goes, well, Jeremiah Smith had 1,300 yards, and it's like, no, not Jeremiah Smith. What does a good Ohio State true freshman wide receiver season look like? And it's like 300 yards. You put up 400 yards as a true freshman wide receiver, it's like, wow, that's one of the best true freshman seasons of all time at Ohio State. I think you might see them have a true freshman wide receiver in that 350 to 400 yard range. I think they would love to not have to have that person be out there day one. You'd love to have some other solutions out there. Maybe some of them are playing in that Texas game, but you're playing 8 snaps, you're playing 10 snaps, you're playing here and there, not as a every down starter kind of guy. If you end up winning a bigger role as the season goes along, great, wonderful. But that trajectory that you talked about with Chris Olave, who sort of showed up almost around Halloween and then played a bigger role as November kind of wore on, or Garrett Wilson, who had some big moments against Miami of Ohio in a game they won by 70 points, but really you didn't really see him until later in the season, October and November, and then in the college football playoff. That's kind of what you want out of a true freshman who is sort of winning his way onto the field. You want him to sort of earn his way on rather than having to sort of just get thrust out there because we don't like our other options, so you got to sort of shove him out there. I don't think they're going to be in that kind of a spot this year, but I do think you're probably going to have a true freshman who has at least that 350, 400 yard kind of season.
Yeah, what does a good true freshman season look like? Well, Jeremiah, what does a good commerce website look like? Well, Amazon. There's levels. I think one of the things with Cortez Hankton, wide receivers coach, is here this year it may not be. They don't have to play the freshman; they want to, and really, there's two different ways to look at having to play the freshman. On one hand, the bad way is because you have nobody else. Two, the good way is they've forced themselves onto the field, so you have to play them. You can't not play them because they are some of your best players. So there's two different ways to look at that. This is you can look at the optimistic way. If they're on the field, it's because they deserve it, as opposed to the pessimistic way. Like if they're on the field, it's because there's nobody else. You can keep a freshman off the field by having somebody better than them, and sometimes you don't. And it's not because of the guys you already have. It's because the freshmen are so darn good, and these freshmen are pretty darn good. So we'll see what they look like. So those are the concerns that I have. Me. Do you guys have any concerns outside of that? Do you have any bigger concerns? Are these concerns enough to derail the season? That's right. We'll talk about derailing the season. The sky is falling? Has the season been derailed? Go ahead and throw your comments in YouTube, and we will take a look at those. And, of course, if you want to talk about this, you can find us over at BuckeyeInsiders.com, talking about all of these things all the time, and would love to see you there. It is the absolute best way to support what we do is become a member over at BuckeyeInsiders.com. So that will do it from here. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you all later.